Do 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 do. Transition music playing. Do do do. Roads.
I'm Rhodes Bailey, and welcome back to the second episode of Asylum South podcast. With me today is Lauren Manning-Gandy.
Hey.
Chris Kinney.
Hey, Rhodes.
Yes. And also today, Don Polite is with us.
Hello, I'm glad to be here this morning, afternoon. How are you feeling?
Feeling good, Don. Feeling good. Today on the podcast, we talk to Columbia restaurateur and businesswoman Sarah Simmons about feeding the city and feeding the economy. With us in the studio also are Jessica Lathran and Mike McCauley.
What's up?
And of course, the man in the control room, smoothing out all our levels, Mr. Zach Thomas.
Good afternoon.
So our guest today is Sarah Simmons. Sarah is the CEO of the City Grit Hospitality Group, which brings creative restaurant and catering and private dining solutions to Columbia through enterprises like Small Sugar, Birds and Bubbles, and Il Focolare, and more. Before moving back to the South, Sarah found success as a restaurateur in New York City. In 2014, she was named among the 50 best chefs in the city by Food and Wine magazine and one of Fast Company's 100 most creative people in business. Since moving to Columbia, she's been a leader in culinary excellence and business innovation. Sarah Simmons, welcome to the Asylum South podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate you being here. So to start with, just explain to folks what all comes under the umbrella of the City Grit Hospitality Group.
So you mentioned Small Sugar and Il Focolare. So those are our two open restaurants in Columbia. We actually have a catering company called 1649 Catering that we're going to switch the name to City Grit Catering because we have the trademark on City Grit Catering and we have to be using it. It was the name of the catering enterprise in New York. So we're just going to make that switch. And we just launched this month City Grit Marketplace, which is an online marketplace that encompasses all of our brands. It's where you can purchase the almonds from Il Focolare and pre-order pastries from Small Sugar. We launched a product line called City Grit Fresh, which is a produce-driven individual meal that's ready to eat. That is specific for vegans or vegetarians, or if you're eating keto, or if you just want to be surprised. It's something that we have been thinking about for a while and just decided to test that out in January. And the goal eventually is to turn the space that's in front of Small Sugar into a marketplace, a physical marketplace. But for right now, we're utilizing, because of COVID, the internet, and we created a new site, and we're just going to create like a virtual food hall, but just for all of our concepts.
And for those familiar with Columbia, that's a building that fronts on Gervais Street in the Vista. So Sarah, I mean, I should say for our listeners, as we talk, we're all stuffing our face with pizza from Il Focolare and various snacks and pastries from Small Sugar. But give the listeners just a sense of the menu. Il Focolare pizza, sort of somewhat self-explanatory, but talk just a minute about the type of food that you'd find at Small Sugar, and the style of cuisine that you really specialize in.
So Small Sugar is very produce driven as well. Actually, the menu at Small Sugar was created based on the produce produced by a number of minority farmers that are within, not really necessarily the city, but most of them are in Sumter. And in 2017, we met some of these farmers, and they had food dying in the field because they couldn't afford to hire someone to pick food that they didn't have a distribution channel for. And so we ended up, working on a menu that would allow us to commit to buying the majority of the produce that they produced. And like the sweet potato bowl at Small Sugar exists because of the massive amount of sweet potatoes that one of the farmers produces. And so that's really how the menu came together. And it all has a similar Mediterranean style to it. But the purpose of that restaurant essentially is to support and hold up those farmers.
So that brings up an interesting issue. Like when I come in to like pick up lunch, and if I come in and get a pork sandwich and a side of beets, I swipe my credit card. At no point do y'all ask me for gratuity. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on to sort of talk about your business model, both in terms of how what you charge, right, for a plate, but also how you think about staffing your enterprises and your restaurants. Would you explain that a little bit for the folks?
Sure. So we're really trying to build the new generation of restaurant group, one that provides employees with a livable wage. Restaurants are notorious horrible places to work. They are owners usually make money off the backs of people that are making minimum wage and can't support themselves. And they aren't treated very well, and they're treated like they're disposable, and the turnover is high. And we wanted to take a different approach. We relaunched all of the brands in 2018 after losing everything we owned in 2017. And it was like, if we're going to risk doing this again and, working our way to make the businesses back, to make enough money to open one, then another, then it's going to have to be worth more than just like winning an award or making good food. And so we really did it with purpose. And we started with wanting to create an environment where people wanted to come. They didn't want to leave. They wanted to see opportunity. We weren't sure exactly what that opportunity was. We were hiring differently. We did not hire a lot of people with a lot of experience. We hired people with great personalities that needed a chance, that needed a step up. And that was way harder than we thought it was going to be. We made the decision to not accept gratuity because gratuity in its essence is racist and classist. It actually is a product of Jim Crow. It is a way to keep control over what people make. And statistically, white men make more. And
so explain that a little bit more to me. Like how, what sort of informed y'all's decision making about that? I mean, that's, look, I used to wait tables and all through college and loved it and made crazy money. What's wrong with gratuity? What challenges does that pose?
Which this might be another show, but Chris loves to brag about his server skills.
I'm sure.
I was an amazing.
I'm sure.
He loves to lay on the charm. You can't eat at a restaurant with this dude without him telling you what an amazing server he was. He wanted every
little old lady, little old lady. Just
this explains why you're so good at door knocking too.
That's another great. We're just gonna do it.
It's like skills overlap.
Can we just make this whole podcast about me?
Yeah,
we're gonna do Eddie Haskell hour with Chris Sidney later.
Sarah Simmons, who? Anyway,
So,
gratuity.
So I think that people think that charging gratuity or accepting gratuity drives better service, but it actually doesn't. It creates animosity among the wait staff. If you do, let's say we tried to do it in New York as fairly as possible. We had a tip pool. The tips were divided based on the hours that you were on the clock. But then there was that one white guy that was so charming, like Chris, so good. He made so much in tips.
Gross.
But then he had to share it with everyone. So then he was kind of bitter because so-and-so didn't pull her weight that night. And look at all the money I'm making. And then it creates infighting, and we just want things to be equal. Also, you have servers that are making $50,000 to $60,000 a year, and you have kitchen team members that are making 20 to 30. And so there's a disparity there, and typically, especially in the South, your front of the house team members are white, and you have people of color in the kitchen, and that's just something we don't want to get behind. I would rather not open restaurants than operate a restaurant that's not inclusive and equitable.
So talk to us a little bit about, because the other thing that I find really interesting about your business is that you mentioned a minute ago that you don't necessarily just immediately gravitate to the folks with the most experience. You're looking for people who are sort of hungry for the opportunity. But that brings a cost. Like how
significant.
How do you overcome that? What have y'all done to bring on board those team members and keep them?
Well, we took 2 weeks before we opened Small Sugar, and we just did, getting to know you types of exercises. We actually had all of the employees on the opening team determine the values of the company, what was important to everyone. So that really set the stage for the values that we hold important, like most critical for everyone to abide by. It's how we cater our questions when we're hiring people. We don't ask a lot of questions about how good of a server you could be or how, much cooking experience you have. We ask you questions to get to know you as a person, to see if you align with our values. So that's one of the first steps that we took after that 2-week period of getting to know everyone. One of our questions that we ask is, what would you do if someone gave you $10,000? How would you spend it? And how someone spends it tells a lot about them. But then we ask, if someone gave you $10,000 to give to a charity, what charity would you give it to? And if you pause for more than 3 seconds before you answer that question, you will not get hired, because that means you don't have other people in the forefront of your mind. And that is what we're trying to build, is a company where people are there for each other. We have your back. That's one of our little taglines that we have, that I got your back. You hear that a lot in the restaurant. And then we want people that actually want to give back. And training is expensive, but turnover is so expensive. And I don't think that people ever think about that. And when Rise closed, I ran the numbers and I looked at it. Turnover was costing us $200,000 a year. And so I would rather eat it on the front end, make a bigger investment in people, and keep them longer. It's in the long run, it pays off. It is paying off.
For those who are not familiar, Rise was this amazing biscuit breakfast joint on Hardin Street in Columbia, and is single-handedly responsible for at least 10 pounds that I gained while that place was open.
Well, pretty soon you may be able to order Rise delivered to your house through City Grit Marketplace.
Oh no.
Those 20 pounds you lost?
Yeah.
You're going to find them again.
It's coming back. It's coming back.
Hey, Rhodes, I've got some licks.
Some licks?
Yeah, some hot guitar licks I need to lay down. Do you know where I could record them?
Well, as a matter of fact, Jessica, I do. The Jam Room studio is the absolute best place to record music in Columbia. They have all the best gear and sound engineers to help you get the sound you want.
You say they have the best gear, but do they have a mid-'80s Roland JC120 amp?
Oh yeah, they have that and so much more. You wouldn't believe the selection of vintage guitar amps. Located at 201 South Prospect Street, right here in Columbia. The guys at the Jam Room would love to help you and your hot licks, so give them a call.
I actually have a question. So, you spend a lot of time up north, and I would imagine that the palettes are quite different than they would be here in South Carolina. And so I'm wondering, what modifications did you have to make to sort of appeal to a Southern, clientele? Or do you find that you wish you could do X, Y, Z, but you have to somehow not do the thing you maybe really want to do because it wouldn't appeal, or you can't get those ingredients, or just from the ingredients perspective? I mean, you make great food, and so I'm curious about the differences in appealing in the South.
I think that when I came home to open Rise, that was a huge fear, that people wouldn't get it, that the food was too fancy, it was too weird, it was unusual. And I didn't move home to make a boring turkey sandwich. So I really believe that you need to stick to your guns. And, Columbia has a more sophisticated palate than I think people give the community credit for. To be honest, Birds and Bubbles every weekend was full of people from Columbia. It was people still stop me and say, Birds and Bubbles is my favorite restaurant. And I'm like, what? Did you live in New York? No, I just went so much. And I think that for us, we just want to capitalize on that and elevate the food scene in the city. Access to ingredients is a problem. We have to get our spices, some of them shipped to us from New York. We get a lot of our dairy, a lot of our cheeses through the same distributor we used in New York City because there's just not a lot of access. I mean, you see I feel like the cheese plates at all the restaurants are like the same 6 cheeses that one of the gourmet purveyors sells. And again, I don't want to spend my time to make something that someone else is already making.
I have a follow-on to that because I took a cooking class with you right after you moved here. And one of the segments or one of the sections of it was about ramps.
Right.
And we had this long conversation about you were so excited to have ramps in this cooking class, and then you couldn't get them. Yeah.
Ramps.
See? Educate
Clearly,
them
you
on
don't
ramps.
watch Top Chef, Rose.
A lot of those ingredients we couldn't
Love
get.
a ramp.
Right.
Somebody needs to tell me what a
He
ramp
doesn't know what a
is.
I
flavor
thought this was
profile
talking
is
about
either.
ADA, guys. I'm like, disability
Don,
accessible, guys.
Don and I were thinking about wheelchair accessibility. What's a ramp?
A ramp, it's a wild vegetable, an allium that is kind of like if garlic and an onion had a baby, and they can't be cultivated. They only grow in the wild, and you'll see in like Virginia. I've seen some photos of like people stopping on the highway and then like running up the side of the interstate because they can see that like ramps are growing, and just
It's a
picking
ramp
them all
ramp.
up. Yep, exactly.
Well, Sarah, we've got our Block C portion of the show. We've got some fun things happening. Can you stick around with us for a little while?
Sure.
Everybody, Sarah Simmons is the CEO of City Hospitality Group. Follow her on Twitter at Sarah MC Simmons, and she's the owner of Small Sugar and El Focolare. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank
Sarah's
you,
going to stick
Sarah.
around with us.
Of course.
Well, now, guys, we're going to do one more segment here. It's real simple. It's Best Band, Worst Band.
Of the 90s.
Right. Today is the 90s. Today's Best Band, Worst Band edition is the 1990s. Guys, the 90s are now old and they're vintagey, even though we all grew up in the 90s.
You're going to make some enemies here, buddy.
Well, you know what? So we're going to go around. Best Band, Worst Band. You can say or it can be a hip hop group. It can be any kind of group. But Best Band, Worst Band just sounds good. All right, who's going to start? Jessica Lathran.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the worst band because it's the band I was actually listening to in the 90s and thought they were great at the time, and that would be the Spin Doctors. But the band that I wish I had been listening to is the best band of the 90s, and that's the Afghan Wigs.
All right. Huh. Did they kind of get their start in the 80s a little bit?
Probably late 80s, yeah, early, and then pretty much all the 90s, and Greg Dooley went on to do some other like solo projects and side projects, and now they're kind of back doing Afghan Wig stuff. But best band for sure. If you don't like them, you should, or don't know them, you should go listen to them. And they're a Cincinnati band, so maybe that's a good reason to throw it to Chris.
They are a Cincinnati band. They are a Cincinnati band.
All right. Who's next?
So, all right. This just says so much about me. Best band from the 90s is a group called Live. The worst band is a group called the Dave Matthews Band. And you can tweet your hate mail to CP Kenny on Twitter.
But there was a time when I was filling out a lot of medical forms, and I thought I was clever, and it would say allergies, and I would write down Dave Matthews Band.
Thank you, Rhodes.
That is very on-brand.
Thank
for
you so
Rhodes.
much.
Yeah.
I think the 90s band that I'm most nostalgic for as a good South Carolinian, I have to say Hootie and the Blowfish.
Well, they're having a moment right now, at least if you live in Columbia. Yeah, you can't... Well, what about worst band, Lauren?
I didn't know that we were supposed to prepare worst band.
The segment's called Best Band, Worst Band.
Can I also say Hootie and the Blowfish is the worst band?
Sorry.
It was my second choice. It was my second choice too.
Platinum Records beg to differ, but
Thank you, Zach.
yeah.
All right, so I'll jump in. This is Don Polite again. If this has been unclear to this point, I am African American with a side of Puerto Rican spit in. So I didn't really grow up in New York City and the Bronx, like listening to a bunch of rock bands in the 1990s. That wasn't really my thing. So actually, I'm going to go with best group, and that's Drew Hill. Right? Drew Hill is actually the group that Cisco was a part of before he made the thong song, and Drew Hill was absolutely fantastic. I was growing up And the only music I got to listen to was like the CDs that my older sister Natalie like handed down to me by hand down. I mean, I got into her room, took some, and took them back to my room, and that's her giving them to me. And so I really like Drew Hill. Worst band though. One thing about Drew Hill. Cisco still, even then, was like really on all the riffs, and so I still play the CDs nowadays. And it's like, I know all the riffs. It's like, forget the chorus, I'm going to riff for like 10 minutes and say no words. Just like the oohs and ahs. I love it. Now, worst band, or worst group, and I'm going to say 98 Degrees, because that's like, I think that's where Nick Lachey was, and I just don't like that guy. Mostly it's like he had the reality TV shows with his wife, and I'm like, why is this guy on my TV? 98 Degrees, worst group.
Good
Yeah.
call. Good call.
My worst band is in line with that. It's New Kids on the Block.
What?
Yes.
Sarah Simmons.
No way, Jose.
How
caught me
dare
dead.
you?
That was
Yeah.
that
Not
was
the right stuff,
That was
huh?
patient.
Not the right stuff anymore.
Patient zero of terrible boy bands. New Kids on the Block.
It really was.
She's thought this one through. If people
She's
talk
thought
about
it through step by step, if you will.
people talk about that was good.
That was good.
Wow.
people
Lauren
talk-
Manning, you're on fire with the New Kids puns. I like this.
Step.
But this is how much of a visionary Sarah is. People talk about going back into a time machine and killing Hitler. But if you went back into a time machine and just stopped New Kids on the Block, that might have saved a lot of ears, a lot of terrible songs on the airwaves for many years. What about your best one, Sarah?
Pavement is my favorite band.
Oh, Pavement. Yes.
Yeah.
You moved too quickly for me to work in my hanging tough.
Wait,
Still
It was
room.
right there, though.
Still
we,
room.
we can put. Do you have another?
You had
yeah.
to move to Hitler, and then I just couldn't work
I
with that.
know.
Well, I didn't compare him to Hitler. I'm just saying there are a lot of exciting time travel possibilities we haven't thought about.
Just to be clear, Donnie Wahlberg and Hitler are the same to Rose Bailey.
No.
Oh, no.
Putting words in his mouth. Now.
All right, Mike.
I don't have a lot of value to add here because I spent the music I listened to in the 90s was mostly country, and it's a lot of individual artists. And I actually tried to do some homework to think about what were good country bands that were active in the 90s, because there weren't a lot.
Solo artists mainly.
Some of the more impactful ones I think were like Brooks and Dunn, who sort of brought back some of the line dancing sort of elements to 90s country that people either love or hate. And then, of course, there were the Dixie Chicks, who obviously, because of their political activism, made a lot of news. But even apart from all that, I mean, they set all kinds of records, obviously being an all-female group. But in terms of, sales and just general success. Worst band for country 90s, there were so many I couldn't come up with one.
Fair. Yeah.
It's hard to pick.
The only thing worse than country bands in the 90s was country bands in the 2000s.
No,
Rascal Flatts.
I'm just going to throw this at people, though. This is really just really top secret stuff right now. My wife is actually from St. Lucia. Her family's from St. Lucia. And apparently, like, growing up, my mom, like, on Sunday music, when you play your chore music, that was salsa for me. But apparently in St. Lucia, this West Indian island, country music is like their Sunday music. So, like, I know my wife used to, like, play this one song for me, and it's really like, I didn't jump the fence. This is guy singing about to his neighbors, like, so I didn't jump the fence to steal an apple from your tree, which basically was, I didn't steal your girl from you.
Oh, I like that.
She came to me, honestly. That apple just was like right on my side of the fence, honestly. That's
And this
Dropped and rolled,
Was that an
right.
American country song?
apparently they just like love country music.
We've got to Google. I've got to find this. Do you know what? I've got to find the country hits that St. Lucia loves.
Like a bunch of old ones, apparently. It's hilarious.
That needs to go in the thesis about exporting American imperialism. That seems like that could be, exporting country music to the Caribbean. I don't know.
That's a whole chapter.
It's,
obviously.
yeah, please.
All right. Well, our musical taste maker Zach Thomas.
Tough choices here. There's so many bands that I loved from the 90s, and probably Soundgarden's got to be up there top. Chris Cornell.
Excellent.
Hard to beat. Worst bands, personally, I hate no band more than the Counting Crows. I could drown that guy.
Well, you could grab him by the dreadlocks
I
very
could,
easily.
exactly. But I can't believe nobody else said this in this Nickelback.
Well, sure. The thing about Nickelback is they really rose to their power of awfulness in the early 2000s, though, right? I'm not saying you're not right. I mean, Nickelback, but I think...
Trust me, they were bad.
They were always bad. Yeah. Oh, God. Well, I feel like you couldn't have Nickelback without Limp Bizkit and Korn, and I think a lot of these new metal, NU metal bands are some of the worst. Limp Bizkit is terrible, although on the way over here I realized the absolute worst act from the 90s that I think most people would agree, or at least wouldn't fight me too hard. Insane Clown Posse.
Oh, that's a good one.
Never heard of it.
What was your best band, Rhodes?
God, I think empirically it's going to have to be Nirvana, although one of my favorites.
They went out with a bang.
Didn't.
Too soon?
Definitely too soon.
Oh, please.
I like Ben Folds 5 a lot though too. I listened to a lot of Ben Folds 5 in the 90s. Of course, Ben Folds 5 is a weird choice because 90s was so ruled by this, at least the rock bands, very heavy aggressive guitars, and of course Ben Folds 5 did not have a guitar player in it at all.
But he played that piano pretty
Sweet
aggressively.
piano, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Was Outkast in the 90s? Was that early 2000s as well?
No, I think that started in the 90s, right? I think
Started
they got
in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, then it's obviously Outkast. I mean, come on, Andre 3000.
There you go.
Outkast
I wouldn't
is
argue with
pretty
that.
great.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's like when people list their top 5 rappers of all time, it's like the Chris Rock movie with Rosario Dawson. It's like, who's your top 5? My wife and I did this, and Outkast is on both of ours. Largely because it's Andre 3000. That my dude is the coolest,
He's the man.
coolest dude around.
Totally agree.
Well, I still think of Outkast as more early 2000s, but I mean, you can't say that they're not influential, and they definitely started in the 90s. I think just when their bigger hits started to really surface. I think when I was in college. Apparently, I'm like 11 years older than Don Polite, though. So
Yeah, man, I'm a baby, but that's why the beard is there. Hide the dimples, age me up a little bit.
Be young while you can, dude.
yeah.
Take it from an old dude.
All right, guys. Well,
Hey, Rhodes.
Yeah.
Can I do an impromptu endorsement?
well, sure. I think
I see what you're holding.
I think that Chris Kinney wants to.
Here's what happened. Last week, Lauren had an endorsement. She flubbed it by forgetting the name of the book and the author, and then I mocked her cancer book mercilessly. Then I went and bought the book, read the book. It's adorable.
See?
Yeah, it really was. It might be better on audio than in print because there's a lot of dialogue, so I could see it being excellent a book on tape. The name of the book is When Life Gives You Pears: The Healing Power of Family, Faith, and Funny People. It's Jeannie Gaffigan is the author. Even if you're not a person of faith, I'm not, but this book is still, it will make you think about your own mortality and about those moments in life that come at you when you least expect them.
Aww.
I endorse Lauren
Thank
Manning's
you.
book, and I got
And Jeannie Gaffigan, I'm sorry that I forgot the name of your book and you.
Look, she signed this copy, and it's all yours.
What? Oh, thank you.
That's right. All Chris Kinney endorsements come with autographed copies.
Sweet.
Sarah, does Small Sugar carry crow pie?
I'm all full of it now.
Oh, that's great.
Well, listeners, if you have your own best or worst 90s band or your own endorsement, or if you want to fact check us in any way, please give us a holler on Twitter at Asylum South. We're also on Facebook. You can also, call us, text us. The chances are high that you know one of the people in this podcast if you're listening. Asylum South was recorded and engineered at the Jam Room Studio in Columbia, South Carolina. Sound engineered by Zach Thomas. Theme music by me, Rhodes Bailey, Jake Irwin, Evan Simmons, and Spencer Collins, plus Zach Thomas. Contributors are Rhodes Bailey, Lauren Manning Gandy, Chris Kinney, Jessica Lathran, and Mike McCauley. Thanks very much to our guests today, Sarah Simmons and Don Polite. Find us on the World Wide Web at asylumsouth.com. At Asylum South on Twitter, Asylum South on Facebook. Subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you liked us, please rate the podcast so others can find it and share it with your friends and family.